Hi, everybody. Welcome back to a very special episode of the Unstoppable Mindset Podcast. I'm going to be your host today, Keegan Lamar, and joining me today is Morgan Koth and Bill Dean, and we will be sorely missing Kim Brady as she will be a regular on this series. So just setting the table here, this is a special episode simply because we're going to be trying to figure out a name of what exactly to call this. Now, if you are watching this or you are seeing this, we'd love feedback. What do you think we should call this? We're always open to suggestions. Otherwise, we're going to come up with a name at some point. So the overarching theme of what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be talking about topics, whether those be issues or just hot news items within the sporting world. And we are going to be covering them from our expertise, going around the bend, hearing pros and cons, being able to hear specific approaches of how we as professionals within the mental performance space or the coaching space or the health space and all these different things, we will be approaching them from our unique viewpoints as to how these things could potentially be better. And then we're also going to be having some banter back and forth. We've said that this is almost like a version of Pardon the Interruption or Around the Horn or something like that, in terms of what we're looking to do here. And we're looking to take a unique spin on it. So with that said, let's first go around the bend here and let's introduce ourselves. This is the first episode of this. Obviously, I'd love for people to be able to introduce themselves, so that anybody listening or watching this can get to know you guys a little bit better. So Morgan, please introduce yourself, my friend.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Keegan. Appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity. Morgan Koth. I'm the CEO and founder of Ascentus Health. We have a mental health platform company, working with companies and colleges and universities, trying to change culture and improve performance. Played rugby in college at University of Connecticut. Been diving deep into mental health and performance and functional medicine coaching for the past 15 years. So I'm happy to be here, happy to get rolling, and happy to see what comes of this and where we go.
Beautiful, man. Bill, get us going.
You bet. Thanks, Keegan. Bill Dean. I'm the owner, CEO of Cosma, Can't Out Scheme Mental Health. For the last 23 years, I've spent in very operational and senior vice president roles within the behavioral health, mental health space, as well as been very active in high school coaching, football and baseball specifically. I'm excited to be a part of this. Morgan kind of kicked it off with his athletic background. I played college football and baseball for 2 years. And then once I realized I really had to focus on academics as the other part of student athlete, then I rounded out my career just playing football at St. Ambrose University. So as we get going, I'm going to bet I have the coolest mascot. We were the Bees. So we have the simplest fight song. And we can have the mascot discussion later. So thanks for inviting me, and this is going to be awesome.
I love it. And as I mentioned earlier, we will be having Kim Brady, who is a business coach and also an athletic coach for soccer, and she helps athletes who are transitioning out of sports and make sure that executives are set up in order to succeed in their world as a performance coach. She will be joining us on here, and I'll allow her to do a formal introduction of herself when she comes in. And also, we're going to be having some special guests on, some people who can give their point of view, play around with the topics that we have in here, offer their thoughts, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So the way that this is going to go is I'm going to be presenting a topic. Now, these are topics that the group that you see before you has actually done a little bit of research on, things that have stood out, whether they're in the news and sports or the world. And we thought it would be beneficial for us to dive into these things and, build them out and see where it can take us. So the first topic that we will be diving into is none other than a hot topic within society these days, which is composure. Now, this came up. If you are a human being, then you have probably heard of this year's Oscars. Now, this year's Oscars included a moment in which Chris Rock, stand-up comedian, and he is somebody who, by definition, points out things, makes jokes of them, makes light of them, all these other things. It's never meant in malice in any way, shape, or form. For the most part, by profession, you're never meaning anything by malice. You're meaning everything in jest. However, he mentioned something that was a sensitive topic to a special somebody who was in the crowd, and her husband, Will Smith, got up, came up on stage, and delivered the right hand from hell straight across Chris Rock's face. There are two sides of the coin that seem to be coming out with some of these things. People such as, hey, he did the right thing. He's standing by, his woman, Jada, and obviously defending her honor, whatever that might be. And then obviously the other side of the coin, which is, hey, that could have been handled a whole hell of a lot better. There was no need for what happened there. And those seem to be the two sides that are coming up. However, this is not the first time that we have seen people lose their composure on national television. This happens all the time in sports. If you ever watch, I don't know, hockey, there's probably a fight every game when people have had enough of each other and they decide to just throw fists with each other out on the ice. You get a penalty. It's part of the game. Now you look at somebody such as Ron Artest back in the day with the Indiana Pacers, losing his composure and going after a fan in the crowd, even though there was some provoking involved. There are so many times in which we see athletes, or actually not so many times, but it's really highlighted when it does happen, when athletes lose their composure during the game. So this just so happens to be the first time we've seen it in a very formal event on national television that is not supposed to have something like this. But in sports, sometimes you see it more frequently. Now, the reason we thought it would be special to bring this up, especially for athletes, is because this is something that when it comes to keeping your composure can be really difficult to do. So I would love to now open up the conversation. The way that we're going to do this is I will be bringing up a specific item that you guys will be covering, and we'll go around the horn, including myself. And we will all have, I'm going to go ahead and show it now. We will have 90 seconds on the clock. So when it comes to your all's responses, let's keep it to 90 seconds or less. And if we hit that mark, you're going to hear me put my hand up and probably stop you there. So we can keep this thing rolling. But either way, the first thing that we're going to cover here, and I'm going to go to Morgan first. Morgan, what are the pros of losing your composure during an event?
Oh, you're killing me. Losing your composure during an event. What's the pros? There are none. You really need to keep it together. That's part of the mental game of any sport, is being able to keep your composure. I tell my son all the time, you're at a basketball free throw line. You see some people miss completely, right? You see them completely miss the rim. Part of that is losing your composure. Part of that is losing your mental edge. Part of that is losing your ability to stay in the rhythm and the flow of the game. Now you lose your composure and that's all out the window. And that goes with, it's a fight or somebody getting in your head. I mean, how many times do you hear athletes know other athletes, right? That they can get in their head. They can get them to lose their composure. And when they do get them to lose their composure, they lose their edge. They want them to lose their composure. So there is no situation in any sport where it's okay to lose your composure, because then you lose your, what you call it in chess, you lose what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish. You lose all the things that you're there for. So I don't think there's any time when it's okay to lose your composure.
Beautiful. Appreciate it. Bill, what do you got? What are the pros of this scenario?
Yeah, well, so, Morgan did a good job of skirting it, right? You got the 5-5 answer. There's no time for it. So I would say two things, having the benefit to think a little while he spoke. One would be, you clearly are exposing things that you need to work on individually. And maybe you're exposing problems of an environment or situation you may be a part of. In the example of of Will Smith and Chris Rock at the Oscars, you know, for so long, it's just okay, right? You can poke, you can jab, and you're kind of, in Chris Rock's role, you're kind of free of harm, kind of like social media. You can say anything from the comfort of what comes out of your thumbs, and really, other than maybe a response, there's no backlash. And so a pro of that situation, or maybe as we look at with our student athletes in the world of social media, maybe it's a realization that, hey, you know, some people are tired of everybody feeling so protected. And if you step wrong, if you hit something because you're not being mindful in a situation, you know, again, don't condone the violence. All those things have been said. Apologies have been issued. But I think in this case, a pro would be, you know, that safety got exposed a little bit. And for a brief second, Chris Rock didn't feel so safe. And Will Smith, although I'm sure he regrets some things, he did well. So he reacted in a way that was
Cutting you off, Bill.
I was gonna say, hey, what's the Google button? Is that 5 seconds?
This is the game we decided to play.
That's time.
I know.
Done.
Good.
I agree with that. I just want to
Because-
make sure I heard it right. That's the warning, right? 3, 2,
Yeah,
1.
that's the 90-second warning. Yeah.
All right. Got it.
Yeah, there's no 3 seconds.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Bill.
it.
Appreciate it. All right. I'm on the clock now. When it comes to losing your composure, I think there are a couple things that are actually pros within this. I think number one, it allows for guardrails in future scenarios to become up, because once again, there's the side of the community that is going to sit there and say, whether it's the guy who threw his beer at Ron Artest, whether it's you know, Chris Rock making an insensitive joke, no matter how much it's by profession, he's a stand-up comic. What it does is it allows, when somebody loses their composure, it clearly on a very public stage draws a fine line in the sand. Now, here's the thing. I'm always going to be someone who says, if somebody steps over a line that you have set that you feel is appropriate, I'm not one to say, especially when it comes to playing a sport, if somebody comes in and you know, steps on your turf and does something that's inappropriate in your eyes, defend yourself, do your thing, do what you have to do in order to say, this is where I draw the line. So it was an opportunity. And I think this happens in sports all the time. It's an opportunity for not only the organizations involved, but also the people involved to understand what is okay and what's not okay when it comes to unwritten rules, so that everybody can start playing on the same field there. Okay. Now let's move over to cons. What are the problems when it comes to losing your composure? I'm going to go opposite this time. Bill, I'm going to come back to you, and then Morgan will come over to you. Bill, you are on the clock.
Yeah, the cons, I think they've pretty much been laid out, right? This point in time, physical violence, reacting in ways that are unsafe, unhealthy, everybody pounces on it. Depending on which media platform you listen to, you know, there are some other angles that people wanted to take with it. I think, you know, for me though, the most unfortunate part of it was the condition that Jada Pinkett Smith is dealing with in this situation was kind of overshadowed by the two that got into it, right? Versus her true feelings and what she's struggling with. And she actually kept, although her nonverbals indicated initial, right? Like, wow, that just happened. She kept her composure. And I think the, you know, the cons around the composure piece, whether it's in a game, whether it's, you know, in a locker room, it affects more than the individual. There's the ripple effects that go out. There's always the cleanup, and it takes away from, or has the potential to take away from, that individual recognizing, hey, there's some things I got to work on to kind of find my balance, right? To better embrace my composure statements or my confidence mindset. So those would be the cons. You kind of lose track of what really needs to be worked on.
Okay. Morgan, On the clock, my friend. Cons.
I got it. I'm gonna jump right in. I'm gonna start early. The con for me, I think, is it distracts from the team. You now are the distraction. You now are the topic of conversation. Take Will Smith. He's now the topic of conversation. All the wonderful things that happen, CODA, whether it's, first, second Oscar for deaf individual, whether it's, the three women, doing the Oscars, whether it's, other people of minority winning or Tribe Quest, their great speech afterwards, right? I mean, all these things that happened that were great, he took away from that. He took their thunder. He took what was going to be theirs, and now it's about him. It's the same thing when you go to a sporting event and you go on a team. When somebody loses their composure, what are they always talking about the next day? What are they talking about in the locker room? Whether it was a win or a loss, it doesn't matter. They're talking about that person and them losing their composure. And that is the biggest con I think you can have, because then you make it about yourself. It's one of the most selfish things you can do when you lose your composure and now you're that person and they're talking about you. And then there's obviously different ways you can go, right? This isn't part of the conversation, but you can be, I'm sorry, I can be contrite, I can be this, I can be, it's not about me, I made a mistake. Or you got the person that goes the opposite direction. They make it worse by talking about themselves, about what they did, how they did it, and that they can, I'm the man, right? I'm drawing my line, and that was my line. He crossed it. I'm a man. Don't disrespect me. I'm gonna come at you. That's the problem.
I love it. All right. I'm on the clock. The number one thing that I see here as a con is control, right? How are people going to perceive the person who loses sense of composure? I mean, whether you look at people who are fighting it out on a football field, and we've seen this between wide receivers and defensive backs, or offensive and defensive linemen, or you see it with a late hit, or you see it obviously with Will Smith. The number one thing that changes is people's perception of you. You immediately become labeled as somewhat of a risk, because people have to take time, energy, and effort in order to be able to understand that they can trust you. And the moment you lose your composure, everybody will start to second guess that. They will ask themselves, are you someone who I can start to put more responsibility on, knowing that at some point, you don't know how you can, if you're going to be able to hold back the monster, because that's the whole thing that makes athletes great. Is it's not that they're like docile or anything like that. It's because they're monsters, but they choose to pull it back to a respectable level and match the game in which they are playing. It has nothing to do with, oh, this person's soft or anything like that. It has everything to do with someone understanding how to just control it. And if you lose your composure, you lose all trust.
I think I'm going to jump right in there just real quick and say that you're absolutely right. How many people didn't like Will Smith before the other night? Yeah. You probably caught it on a hand. I mean, they loved him. Everybody loved Will Smith, the Prince of Bel-Air.
Man couldn't do anything
summertime.
Wrong.
Summertime came out in the 90s. I mean, we were all in the summertime. I mean, fantastic. I mean, who didn't love Will Smith? And now, right?
Yes, 100%. So this next segment that I want to dive into, and I think, Morgan, you're already on a roll, so I'm going to come back to you. What we're going to do is we're going to present habits or changes or different approaches from our expertise as to how to maybe get a better outcome than what happened. So, Morgan, you specialize in helping people build healthy habits in their life, and these healthy habits lead to better outcomes naturally. So I would like to hear from you, and I'll put you on the clock here. What are some of the habits that you can put in place in order to get a better outcome where you don't lose your composure?
Oh man, I didn't know where you were going with that. You went back to composure. With me, when you're talking about habits, you're talking about environment. Yeah. So for me, if you're not going to lose your composure, you're talking about composure, you're talking about environment, that you're putting the people around you that you can trust, that support you, that love you, that care for you. That really, to me, is going to help any individual not lose their composure. Or if they are starting to lose some sort of composure, then they can pull them back in. They can put their arm around them. I mean, how many times did you see LeBron James put his arm around J.R. Smith? Right? I mean, how many times did that happen in Cleveland? A ton, right? Even that time when he messed up, on that free throw and got that rebound and was dribbling around in the last 8 seconds. Like, what is going on? But even afterwards, I mean, puts his arm around him, right? I mean, those type of things are the environment that you're in is really going to help you be able to control composure when it comes to that sort of habit. If you do have a habit of losing composure, I'm a big fan of changing your environment, whether it's, you know, going for a run, putting those shoes and workout clothes, out before, you go to bed, or, if you've got to work on the food you take, don't buy the food, don't bring it into the house, right? Changing that environment will help the composure when you put those supportive people around you.
Awesome. Bill, you are uniquely in a position to be able to talk about group dynamics that need to be changed, whether that's leadership or the people who make up the group. What are some of the things that you see here that can help athletes out there continue to keep their composure when it comes to the group or the team setting?
Yeah. One of the most famous sayings, of course, it's by an individual athlete, individualized sport, but Mike Tyson, right? Everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the mouth. And so, from a team dynamics, a little ironic to this earlier example, but from the team dynamics, it's really for us, it's, focusing on adversity will show itself, right? At some point, sometime. How we overcome it, that's our choice. And how we come together and what we work on daily, keep practicing, right? Keep focused on it. Have those team composure statements, individual composure focus areas or statements. When you put all that together in a team sport, now you can lift each other up, right? I can read my nonverbals in you, if it's a big moment in the game and I can tell you're on edge, or I've been noticing somebody you're going against is chirping in your ear, all right, I can influence you and I can reel you in hopefully and say, hey, we're in the lead, keep it together. The outcome's more important than where you're at right now. So, those aspects of the group dynamics, the team aspect, I think if you're able to practice them day in and day out, you're able to really have a regimen around a team focus and commitment. I think when those things present themselves, your teammates can help you get through it, and you can then reciprocate that and help them through it.
And I just quickly want to add to that before I go in. I really enjoyed what you said there, especially from the team perspective, because you see so many times like the 90s run with the Bulls, and you saw this with the Last Dance. It's not like they perfectly all got along. There were things that came up, but they made their team dynamic tougher than it would be with other teams. And so therefore, when things would come up, they've already dealt with it. They're already conditioned to be able to understand how these things impact them. So I really appreciate what you said there.
Me too. It was real good.
All right. I'm on the clock. Position I'm going to take on this is what distraction is at play and what's the distraction that needs to be removed in order to get a better result. I think the distraction that comes up, especially when it comes to composure, is taking things personally. I think understanding context behind, and coming from someone who played in big stadiums where you hear plenty of people apparently know your mother and you never knew did, right? And so you're sitting there hearing all sorts of stuff about your family members, about you, about all these different things, and understanding that context obviously matters. If you're in a game, if you're it'd be totally different if something was said like that and it was out on the streets. But when you're in a formalized event with someone who's a stand-up comedian, or if you're playing a sport and you have heckling fans or anything like that, context matters. And as soon as you start taking stuff personally, number one, you're going to be uncoachable. Number two, you're not going to be able to perform worth a damn, because you're sitting there and you're taking everything personally, and you're going to get frustrated and upset, and you're going to get knocked off your game. So the distraction is believing that everything that is said has to be internalized personally and not understanding how to be able to detach. I think for me, that's the biggest thing. That's a teaching moment coming out of anytime somebody loses their composure. Okay.
Well done.
Let's dive into the next segment, which this is being able to say what you agree with or what you disagree with in terms of something anybody else has brought up. Let's get a little bit of rebuttal or a little bit of agreement going. And if it's okay, I'll kick this one off.
Perfect.
So the big thing that I really, really heard that stood out to me that I do want to agree with are the team aspects that both you guys brought up. Number one, Morgan, in terms of the environment, really having a group of people who are supportive around you so that when you start to fall off tracks, they can yank you back in. And obviously from a team perspective, Bill, this is exactly what happens when every good team understands when someone is starting to hit the guardrails of their mental capacity or any of that other stuff. And you have teammates who are transparent and comfortable enough with you to be able to say, we need to rope you back in. I think that is such a massive takeaway that anybody listening to this needs to understand is, number one, the big thing that came out of what both of you all said is none of you said, go lone wolf it for crying out loud. Like, it's all about understanding who you surround yourself with and realizing that if you're ever going to be in any situation, being able to understand that you have a support system available and you have a group of people who are counting on you allows you to become accountable to a higher calling than just yourself and your own pride and all this other stuff, right? You give yourself something larger that you're like, you know what? Check yourself real quick before you do something stupid. That was one of the big takeaways that I had. Okay. Morgan, what was your big takeaways?
Two things, and I'll segue on what you said too. One, I want to jump on what Bill said. I absolutely agree. Most times you don't rise to the occasion, you go to the level of your practice, right? I think that's what Bill was saying when he was talking about teams. A lot of times we don't rise to the occasion. We don't get to that. It's because we've practiced so much. We're in that flow state that we understand our muscles just, that muscle memory just kicks in and we don't have to overthink it, right? I think, Keegan, what you said about not taking it personal, I think that was one of the big things of The Last Dance was Michael Jordan took everything personal. That drove him, right?
Yeah,
so to that point,
and I took that
right to that point. It's like, some people get driven different ways as long as you don't lose that composure, right? And sometimes you walk that fine line between out of control, right, and in composure, right? That's almost that, like, that perfect sweet spot of, you're just almost out of control, but you're not, right? So those are the two things that I think I took away from there. The other thing was about environment. And I think that having those supportive people around you, again, it just makes all the difference in the world. So, those two things, one, pushing back on Keegan a little bit with that don't take it personal, and having the rising to the occasion with that team and practicing.
Bill, talk to me.
Yeah. So I go back to the first part, the pros, and I agree 100% when Morgan identified, there are no pros. That being said, I do believe the exposure of it is what's so important of the event, right? Whether it's, in this case, at the Oscars, I think you referenced the Malice at the Palace, many of the examples out there gets to, I hope we do not lose sight. I'm not trying to get too philosophical, but as a society to say, yeah, everybody's got a response, right? But we've been condoning this type of behavior for how long? And then we're going to pick and choose when we want to have feedback or give comments because somebody did something. Well, the guy that threw the beer that landed on the chest, Ron Artest, right? Was it Ron Artest? Yeah. Yep. In Detroit, Mike, they all knew it wasn't the first time that guy drank too much, right? At every sporting event. And then the opportunity presented itself, and what happened? He just acted the way he always had been to a degree. Yeah. And so I hope those are the takeaways that, how can we become more mindful of these situations? Listen, people are going to continue to lose their composure, but if we can keep focusing on mindfulness, that may help a little bit.
And we'll kind of freeform it for a couple minutes here, but number one, I wanted to respond to the comment of, obviously, Michael Jordan taking stuff personally. I think he's a very rare version of a human being who can get so pissed off that it elevates his game to this different level. And so I completely agree with with it, like specifically that context, there are some athletes who there's kind of this like awaken the monster within moment where you take something personally and you go with it. But then at that point, you're not losing composure, you're gaining focus, right? You now say, I know my bullseye at this point. And so if it comes to like, if you know, you're someone who gets that, which you'll know this early, you'll know this very early. And I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on this. You understand early if you either rise to the occasion and become more focused, or if you start to collapse, if you take things personally. Thoughts?
I absolutely agree. One of the reasons I talk about that is because I was that person. I was the person that when I got a little angry in sports, I played absolutely better. I played more aggressive. I didn't lose, I wasn't out of control. And it was just, I felt more in the flow, as they call it, right? It just in that state of more focus. I was absolutely that person. So, whether it was about things taking personally or just whatever it was, I rose a little bit higher, jumped a little bit further, did things a little bit harder. And that might be actually, to be honest, if I'm really diving in, it might actually be a knock on me. Like, why wasn't I getting to that level every time? Why did I have to be a little bit on edge? Why did I have to take things a little bit personal? Why did I have to be a little bit angry? And that's, as a kid growing up, or, as a young adult or in my 20s, that's something I didn't have the opportunity to reflect on. I wish I did, right? You wish you could talk to people, and you wish you had that ability to be able to say, hey, you know what, you're playing better this time, but why? Right. So that's, that's the thought about me and my personal, N of one type thing. But yeah, I absolutely, that's one of the reasons I brought that up, because I can feel that.
Yeah. Bill, thoughts?
No, I think both excellent points. And for me, I kind of keep going back to, a lot of individuals we work with, and like a lot of our examples and context has been with, famous people or professional athletes. I keep pushing that down. We're seeing more and more of this, crap, if you will, at the AAU and U-Trip levels. And it's one thing to talk about mindfulness if you're making 7 figures a year, right? You can reel that in pretty quickly. But the things we're seeing on social media, from, a local weekend tournament to, a football game, whatever it might be, this official just got knocked out by dad or mom or, grandma even sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, that's the level of composure, or that's the focus of composure, where I think we better make sure right now, all of the leaders, right, all the people that are exposed to this, somebody needs to be talking to kids about this, because right now it's funny. It's not funny, but it's a lot of memes out there, a lot of GIFs that are being generated. But at some point,
I have to. Did you?
It's going to come back.
Did you just call it memes? It's memes. Bill,
memes,
I'm going to need
GIFs.
you to fix your vocabulary. We've got young people who are going to be watching this, and
in Iowa, it's memes.
In Iowa, a lot of things are different, Keegan. I mean, come on, man.
I'm so sorry. I should preface. Bill's from Iowa. There's a lot of things that are nuanced out there.
Well, if our viewers learn anything, it's apparently memes. So we're good on that now.
You know what? I'm going to piggyback real quick. I know, Keegan, you wanted to say something, but I want to piggyback real quick on what Bill was saying, that I absolutely agree with him that part of the problem, and we're going to get big here, part of the problem is things are condoned. Let's take Will Smith. He got to sit there and finish the Oscars and take the acceptance speech for his nomination, and he won. I'm not sure that's okay, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that you see, like he was talking about social media, where, young dads are on the sideline going back and forth, coaching their daughter when the coach is there. There's situations when, moms are on the sidelines screaming at their son to do this and do that over the coach's shoulder. And there's lots of things going on where people are coming on to the field or to the court, and nobody is really stopping that. They're saying, oh, no, you shouldn't do that. But that person is there next week. That person is there the week after. That person is there the week after. The kids are seeing this. There's no repercussions. There's no accountability. for these adults doing non-adult things. And that's part of the problem, is the accountability of these people doing bad things. And you can see it, whether it's on airplanes, you can see it, whether it's on all sorts of different places within our culture, that there's not that accountability that needs to be there to show kids that, hey, it's not okay to do that. You can't blame the victim, right, for something that happened to everybody else when it was the person's fault that stole the car in the first place. When the police officer saying, well, why did you leave your key in the car? Well, it's 10 degrees. I was warming my car up and I was going back inside my apartment, and now I come back and my car's gone. Well, you shouldn't have, warmed it. So you're blaming me for my, I mean, it's all that sort of stuff with the accountability. Sometimes things are just mixed up and backwards. And there's no accountability for, people saying, oh, they disrespected me. Really?
Yeah. And that might be the way we close out this topic. I think that's a perfect way to do it, is when you lose your composure, there needs to be a repercussion, and really that falls on any type of governing body for whether it's a formal event such as the Oscars. I completely agree. I think you don't get to go up and slap somebody on live national television and then a few minutes later go give an acceptance speech on something, which, from what I've heard, I don't know if it's confirmed or not, there are some types of things saying that he may get that stripped away for misconduct. But anyways, it should have been nipped in the butt immediately. And someone should have come over and said, hey man, you can't just go hit somebody whenever you so please, and then just come back down and order another drink and just hang out. Like that's unacceptable. Same thing with, the moms or dads who are doing all the crazy stuff during sports games with their kids that's getting posted on social media, because the thing is, everybody likes it and comments, and if people are, the crazier the person, the more that it gets posted and the more it gets shared, and so the more it perpetuates this bad behavior. So if you lose your composure, there has to be a repercussion, there has to be ownership, and then there has to be accountability of, hey, this needs to change. And if it doesn't change, I'm sorry, you can't be a part of this. One of the best places where I see stuff like this is in the armed forces. Something happens and there is immediate repercussions and there is immediate accountability set for that person. And that person has to take ownership or they're gone, right? Because there's too high of stakes in order for someone to be effing around and doing whatever they so please. So I completely agree with you. And that might have been the best way to close out that topic, if you gentlemen are willing to move forward.
I'll just leave you with this, though, King. Sometimes with a little jest, but real simplicity, Dalton from Roadhouse has the best line, right? And when somebody says, what if they say something about my mom? Be nice. And be nice until it's time not to be nice. And you'll know when that time is. Just be nice. That helps the composure and it helps the mindfulness aspect of it.
100%. Okay. We're on to topic 2. We're on to the second half of our conversation today. This second topic is brought to you by yours truly. I thought this would be interesting to dive into as we are set for the Final Four for the NCAA tournament, both men's and women's. I know there have been some games that have been played, but on the men's side, it has been deemed the most blue blood lineup that has ever occurred in NCAA men's basketball tournament history. And I thought it would be a really good topic to potentially dive into. Now, for those of you who don't understand what blue bloods is, it's a term that means royalty. It was believed that in the olden days that people who were of royal descent actually bled blue. And so the term blue-blooded obviously refers to programs that have a history of winning. They're considered to be royalty when it comes to their respective fields. So in college, this is all over the place. You think of women's basketball, you think of UConn, right? Like that's as blue blood as it gets in terms of women's basketball. I mean, and so anytime they lose, it's like, hold the phone. What the hell just happened? And when Kentucky on the men's side got knocked out, everybody's just like, what in the ever living hell just occurred? But we are looking at a Final Four, and I will pull up the teams. Duke, Kansas, North Carolina, and Villanova are the 4 teams that are in the in this Final Four for the men's side. And the number of championships that are all racked up greater than any other Final Four that has ever been played, and is ranked as the number 1 in terms of blue bloods. I think the discussion is leading to this. When it comes to being blue-blooded, yes, there are some programs that as time goes on have started to stand out. Is that a product of the program itself or the athletes who have gone to these programs? Is there a correlation? Is there a causation? And what I would like to dive into is kind of dissecting this a little bit and understand, is having blue bloods out there in terms of, like naming certain things as, oh, they're college royalty or whatever that is. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What are our thoughts on it? And how can people essentially, if you are a current athlete, like, what should you make of it? Right. So, Bill, I'd love to start with you on this when it comes to the pros of having these historically winning teams. What are the good things that they bring to the college landscape?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, it gives you a target, right? If you're not one of the blue bloods, what else do you go to work for every day? Why do you go practice? Why do you go to the weight room? Why, as a coach, do you think that you need to stay up 22 hours this day to get ready for the big, rivalry or the big pinnacle program in your conference? So I think it feeds that passion. It feeds, I'm an Iowa State fan, right? We have Coach Matt Campbell and Iowa State, Kansas is in the Big 12. And that's really how we measure seasons in basketball, right? If you hung with Kansas, that's good. If you beat Kansas, that's what we're hanging our hat on. So I think the pro is it continuously motivates everyone else around them in their conference. And also, let's be honest, it gives people like us and others, right, something material to complain about till next year. It's unfair. They get all the advantages, et cetera, et cetera. Hey, if you don't like it, beat them. So that's the pro. It better give you some motivation to eliminate one of them from your side of the bracket if you're in it with them.
Awesome. Morgan, you're on the clock.
Money, 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 money. That's what it is. That's what it's about. That's what it's been about. That's what it's going to be about. It's money. These schools bring in the dollars. They bring in the athletes. They get them going to the next level. It's money. It's a factory. That's what it is. It's simple. You take these athletes and you put them in the HBCUs. Guess what? Those blue bloods aren't blue bloods anymore. And that's an interesting topic that I heard somebody talk about, is you take all these star athletes, whether it's football or whether it's basketball, and you put them in the HBCUs. What happens? Where's the money transfer to? Who's getting the television rights? Where are the good games? I mean, the G League is now taking college basketball a little bit down a little bit because these guys are going, there's a lot of one and dones now. Even if they're not going to the pros, they're going somewhere else, right? Take ball, for instance, the youngest one. So there's a lot of things going on now in college basketball. You talk about blue bloods, and you got the Kansas, the Kentucky, the Duke, the UNCs. Heck, sometimes it's even like UConn in the past 10 years, arguably, Michigan, UCLA. I mean, there's some teams in there that, but it always comes down to money, television rights. What kind of caliber are they recruiting? What kind of, five-star athlete are they getting? It comes down to money. College is a money business. And these athletes, these kids are money. And that's what they're making. That's what these blue bloods are all about. They love the blue blood. They love the attention they're getting, right? It's not just about basketball to them. It's marketing. It's not about these kids. It's about marketing. That's the thing. That's what's going to happen.
100%. And before I go, I would like for anybody who doesn't understand, define HBCUs.
Historically Black colleges and universities. Howards of the world, those colleges that, don't get enough attention, but have super caliber athletes, super caliber educations. Problem is they're underfunded. And they're underfunded because the sports that they're bringing in, or the athletes that are bringing in, the sports that they're providing, don't get those television rights like these blue bloods do. So they're not funded like these other colleges are. And part of the problem is some of these kids think, okay, well, I need to get paid. So they're going to go to these blue bloods, right? But what if, things got twisted and things got changed? I would love to see that, to be honest.
Yep. Okay. The pros, I think, of having blue blood programs. I mean, I think we've both touched on it. I mean, number one, it brings in a ton of money. Number two, it brings in a ton of great athletes and a ton of great competition. It creates a great product when it comes to whether it's college football, college basketball, college whatever. It creates a great product when you have these royalty schools that continuously on a perennial basis are in competition. And because the thing is, that's why we love March Madness, right? Is every once in a while, one of them gets taken out, like Kentucky, and it creates for an amazing headline. But the thing is, if you don't have a blue blood school in the NCAA championship, chances are everybody's going to look at it and try and look for the wrong rather than look for this is pinnacle talent that we are used to being able to perform. And I think the other thing is, these schools have a lot of leverage. These royalty schools, they just grow and grow and grow and immediately get more and more leverage, so that when new initiatives come out, whether it's in favor of the athletes, like we look at name, image, and likeness and all this other stuff, the people who are driving most of those things are the schools that have all the leverage when it comes to the caliber of athlete, because they have all the say in the marketplace. So I think there's a lot to be said for the pros there. Okay, coming back to you, Morgan. What is the problem here with blue blood programs?
Money. I think I answered it. I could say, just replay what I said the last 90 seconds. The problem is the money. The problem is the out percentage of the overabundance of determination that they have in the marketplace, right? You look at the Big Ten, you look at all these, I'll take UConn, for example. They were in the American, now they're back into the Big East. Why are they back in the Big East? Because they weren't getting the clout. They weren't getting any money. They weren't doing, so they need to go back to the Big East, right? Of basketball, that's where they had to go. They had to play Villanova again, which is great. I love them. Big East is where I grew up, and that's where they were. But there's a lot of influence that these schools have. And sometimes they use it for good, and sometimes they use it for selfish reasons. We all are like that. We have our biases, and these schools are, they're run by people. They're run by people that have their biases and have their own, agendas. And those agendas don't go to every school within their conference, but also, how many Division I schools are there? Let's just 350, something like that. So, it doesn't go back to the bottom school. So I think over influence of these schools is, I think, a huge problem. And they know it too. And they can get those TV rights. You took a look at Texas. What are the TV rights? One school, two schools, control everything. So I think that's a major problem.
Okay. Bill, what are the cons?
I appreciate you zapping Morgan too. It's about time he got zapped for what's that old show? No Whammies, right? The biggest con for me is it continues. And listen, before I get into it, because this won't take long, I'm still buying my season tickets for Iowa State and going and enjoying Big 12 competition. I'm still watching everything. I'm getting in NCAA pools. I am carving out bowl weekend and everything. So wrestling and you name it. But it just continues to, I think, close that gap of having a real distinction from collegiate athletics and professional sports. And the reason I say that, not just because those four schools are in the Final Four, but the conferences are all getting that money, right? They got revenue sharing aspects, and it's just going to continue to put the pressure on, just make it one big conference. We play these schedules, and before you know it, you lose your championships and all that. And I don't know when that'll occur. Hopefully after I'm long gone and looking down over everybody. But that's what I think. It just continues to close that gap. But that's what I see as the biggest problem. But at the end of the day, I'm still watching it. I love it.
No.
I'm going to root for Villanova because they beat Georgetown. I want to make sure they win, hopefully. But, if not, then I'll root for Kansas in the Big 12. So at least my school gets some of that revenue sharing somewhere along the way, hopefully.
Okay. Love it. Thank you. All right. I'm on the clock. So I think the biggest con to blue blood schools is it by nature makes certain things interesting and then therefore other things just not interesting, right? I mean, we talked about money. We talked about all these other things. What I see as the biggest problem is the fact that fans can predict if someone's going to get their butt handed to them going into a game, and therefore it may or may not even be worth going to. And because I think college sports are some of the most exciting sports that you can possibly invest into, because Bill, you're totally right. It's teetering on college sports and professional sports at this point. But could you imagine if the landscape of sports was Duke could play St. Peter on any given day, and you have no clue who's going to come out on top, or if anything, it's a 50-50 shot, right? They're because I wanted to screw with the analysts. I want the University of Colorado to be able to walk into, to the Jayhawk facility and no one know what's going to happen. I think the dispersion of talent is getting tainted by blue blood programs. And I think NIL, and I get buzzed. There's mine. But I'll finish that thought. I mean, I think if you disperse more athletes amongst all the schools in terms of the talent pool by using NIL and all these other things, and you see it happening with Jackson State, then you just get better, an overall better product, and you don't have this big of a good product, but you have so much more of a better product when it comes to college sports. Okay.
I'm gonna hold on. I'm gonna jump in real
please.
quick and just confirm what you just said. I know you're gonna love this. I'm confirming you. I'm saying,
whoa, everybody, right. Let's take a moment here.
The rise of Gonzaga, right? The past 10 years, it's been fantastic for basketball. It's fantastic for the West Coast, right? How fun, if you guys remember, how fun was it watching young, I'm blanking, the Warriors. Why am I blanking on his name? Davidson.
Oh, Steph Curry.
Steph Curry. Jeez, I've been watching him for years, beat up Cleveland. How fun was it watching Steph Curry, young Steph Curry at Davidson, right? I mean,
or Jimmer Fredette at BYU.
That makes it so much, that makes it better, right? Doesn't that make it more exciting when, you got this thing coming up, you got this team that could win? I mean, there was a couple of years where there was some parity in basketball, and it seems like it's going the other way, but I don't know. That might just be might be me feeling something that's not real.
I feel like sports phase in and out of the super teams, right?
Yeah.
So every season, obviously you get some super teams, and then every so often you get like an even dispersion where there really aren't any, or there's enough super teams where like there's not one that stands out from the crowd, and at some point like it's going to collapse. I completely agree with you there. Okay. The approaches that I'm interested is flipping it from teams and programs to athletes. What I would be curious about is to hear your all's perspectives, and I'll call them out individually, on how athletes can adopt more of a blue blood mindset, right? So, Bill, I'm going to start with you here. How can teams develop a culture or a mindset or whatever pops out to you that is in alignment with becoming a blue blood program?
Ooh. Well, I mean, you start with, you increase your booster clubs, your donor, pools, and you upgrade your facilities. It's an arms race of facilities, right? So if you build one indoor facility, I'm building two of them with A, B, and C, and I'm putting in the restaurant, and I'm putting in the cooler player lounge, So I think there's naturally that aspect of it. You're just enhancing your overall physical plant, all of your facilities to keep up with the Joneses. And then I think it's hiring great coaches. I think there's some universities that have done an amazing job getting out of their own way, right? Don't hire the person that used to be a big name somewhere. Like, go for the new blood, right? If you want to beat the blue blood. So, young coaches from the MAC conference or other, Division II or FCS schools, you go out and you bring them in, and then you hopefully take care of them. You pay their assistants more, and hopefully they stick around until they elevate themselves, to where you're competing against the blue bloods. And then all of a sudden you shake the world up a little bit, because now you're playing in the championship game of that conference or the championship bowl game, and it can just completely turn around your organization and your program.
I love it. I love it. Especially that point that you brought up with bringing in younger coaches. I mean, you look at people, in NFL, you see young coaches, or even in basketball, you see young coaches coming in, and all they know how to do is shake things up. They see the game in a totally different way. They see it as it's evolving. And so they can introduce new concepts to all of it. So I really appreciated that sentiment there, and I totally agreed with it. Morgan, what are habits that athletes have to be willing to adopt if they want to become blue blood athletes?
Well, I was all thinking about the team. Now you're getting about the individual.
You can go about teams. I'm 100% fine with that.
I'm going to – teams have got to focus on the weakest link. You're only as strong as your weakest link. It reminds me of the story of JFK, 1961, 1962, when he's in NASA. You guys might have heard this story. He's walking around. He sees a janitor, asks the janitor what he's doing, and he says, I'm helping go to Mars, or helping go to the moon. I'm helping go to the moon, right? And it's that belief, and that's something that's bigger than yourself, right? And when your entire team embraces that, then amazing things can happen, right? So for me, it's building that habit of belonging and inclusion, and making sure everybody's buying in to the mission, right? Whether it's going to the moon, or it's winning that next game, or it's winning that championship. If you can get everybody on the first bench, the first seat that's right next to the coach, to the last seat at the end of the bench, right next to the water cooler, right? You guys know what I'm talking about, right? It's either everybody along those seats is buying into the mission. And if everybody's playing their role and doing their part, then amazing things can happen from a team perspective. And then as an individual, you get that sense that something is greater than yourself. And you feel that sense of belonging and inclusion, and you feel like things matter, that you do. So when you can get those things in place from a coaching standpoint, if you can get those things in place from a team standpoint where everybody's buying in, then it matters.
I love it. I love it. Okay. I think distractions that have to be removed in order to unlock more of a blue blood mindset has to be, and you guys hit on some really good things. Number one, the team habits, and everything else when it comes to having the facilities and putting in the money and all that other stuff. I think the other thing that has to be addressed here from a coaching and management perspective, if you want to become a blue blood program, I hate to say it, and Bill, this is going to be in a slight disagreement with what you're saying. You cannot continually dump tons of money into player acquisition. At some point, you have to care almost more about player retention. And I know in some parts of the country, maybe Iowa, that's a bit bass-ackwards, but I have seen over this past year, more athletes have entered the transfer portal coming out of the NCAA college football season than ever before. And that's probably due to a lot of different things. But if you want to build a great program, you want to become a blue blood program, you have to, from a coaching perspective, you have to care more about player retention than player acquisition. And so the distraction is caring more about all the shiny objects to bring people in rather than giving a crap about the people who are on the team. Okay.
I just want to say, hold on. I just want to say something real quick. I got nothing but love for Iowa. I don't want any of that mail that comes Keegan's way, man. I got number love for you, Iowa.
This is going to be a rolling topic here. I don't know how they do it in Iowa, but let's open it up here. So I want to hear from, and I'll start first on this one. We'll open it up to what are the big takeaways? What are the things that stood out to us? So I'll go first and on clock's on. So the biggest thing that really stood out to me that I think is a really good key point is, I mean, I'll agree with Bill. I think there is, when it comes to blue bloods, there's a certain look and feel that you have to have that players are expecting. And whether you are a current athlete at a college, I mean, one of the things that I was shown when I was getting recruited, I'd come in and they'd say, here's plans that we have in place, right? Like, you want to feel like you're at a blue blood program. And so when it comes to how people manage and operate places, I do think looks matter, and they shouldn't, but the thing is they do, right? Like, I mean, it should care more about the quality, whether it's the quality of education or the stage and platform or the level of competition, putting yourself in a good position to be able to have a long-term career, rather than, hey, look, we have like you press a button and a burrito comes out type of thing. I don't know, but like when it comes to today's landscape, you have to care about, keeping up with the Joneses, because it's part of now the unspoken rules of the game that you have to meet a certain threshold. And I think that was something that really stood out to me, even though I hate it. Morgan, what stood out to you?
Hold on. Don't start the clock yet. I want to see Bill's sign.
Okay.
There it is. I knew he was writing something. I knew it was coming.
I love it.
That's going to be my new thing. I'm holding this. I'm going to get my lighting better. I'm just going to put this up when I want to say something to you, so I don't have to talk and interrupt.
But you know what? When UConn women win the national championship, as they will do next weekend, so I'll hold my UConn sign up. All right, so we can do that.
I love it. I love it.
All right.
What stood out to you?
What's the question? What stood out? What stands out?
What stood out as a big takeaway for you?
You know what? Regarding Blue Bloods, my son and I used to do this weekend camp over at Kentucky. It's a father and son basketball camp with coach over there, and all the basketball players are getting involved. It's a fantastic opportunity for him and I, obviously, spend some time together, and to see, we stay in the dorms and we go and work out at the facilities and play basketball in the facilities. That matters. Like you said, it shouldn't, but it does. And in a way, I'm going to push back a little bit on what you're saying is it shouldn't matter. I think it should matter, right? I mean, you can't go into a gym and a basketball place in a college and be on a YMCA slippery, non-bouncy ass floor. I mean, it's just a non-breakaway rims. I mean, it's not something we played that, inner city kids play there. They want to go somewhere that makes them feel a little bit special, makes them feel a sense of belonging, make them feel supported, makes them feel something special, because they don't get that. Right. And so I think that is important. So I think quality matters. So that's one of the things that I think it does matter. Right. It shouldn't, but it should too. They got to put some money back into it, because the kids deserve some of that money that they're putting in there for their bodies. They should be able to get those massage and those cold and cool baths and the nice showers. And, Kentucky's got all that, and they've got places that are probably just as nice. Haven't been NBA places, but they're just probably as nice as NBA places. We went into the Kentucky locker rooms. I'm telling you what, they were like some spas that I've been into. I mean, they were nice. So, big takeaway is, yes, the money matters. And to me, it's about the money. And that's what the Blue Bloods have, is the money.
I mean, those kids raise, billions of dollars. I mean, what was the most recent TV deal that I saw with the NCAA was like 12 or 13 billion dollars for March Madness rights for like 2 or 3 years or something like that. I mean, these guys, these athletes as a whole work their tails off. And so I completely agree that they should be given. It's why have such a strong standpoint on NIL, is because these athletes are doing a ton of stuff. And obviously, like, the minimum requirement should be that they get these things. And it's not that they should be building these things just so that they can bring in new talent, but almost as a building these things to say thank you for the people who are there. So I completely agree with Morgan, what you're saying. Bill, what's your big takeaway from what's been said so far?
Yeah, I want to make sure we don't cloud over the aspect that winning is good, right? And if you're within the framework of the rules, right? If like with NIL and stuff, we can put enough safeguards in for these young student athletes so they get the financial literacy they need and all those things. Let's hope and let's make sure that's there. But at the end of the day, win at everything you do, right? You want the best facility, build it. You got a donor who's making the money to build it for you, go get them on board. If your facilities get the 5-star, do it. And I do think that the unique part is there are blue bloods at every level. We're talking about the biggest stage. My son goes to Morningside University, who's won 3 of the last 4 NAIA football championships. They might be considered a blue blood of NAIA football right now. FCS, North Dakota State, they're blue blood programs. Why? Because they win. And so, I love the picking things apart, and because I think that helps, get some things that might be unhidden, right? Expose them a little. At the end of the day, if you're doing stuff the way you should be to win at everything. There's no greater feeling.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. I mean, that's why we're here. And the only way that you actually get to that point of winning is you have plenty of losses, but when you stay consistent with it. I mean, the other day I was actually having I had a workshop keynote thing, and I brought up the numbers 30, 49, 64. And people were just like, well, and it gave no context. And I was like, do you think these are high or low? And, people are like, I think it's low. And, or some people said, maybe that's high. And, and some people are like, if those were test scores, they'd be 2 Fs and a D, right? So number one, like context matters in everything. So when we're talking about college landscape today, like the context of bringing in good talent, you have to play the game. Like it absolutely matters the way that things look. And obviously it cares more. It cares more with the, people leaving and going pro earlier and in the churn and burn of college athletes today. You have to put it in a position where you bring in good talent all the time, rather than, because if you try and do a building project, and you do it for the people who are already there, going to be graduated by the time that it's done. And that's one thing that obviously sucks. Now, obviously those 3 numbers that I mentioned, 30 is Hank Aaron's batting average, 49 is MJ's shooting average over his whole career, and 64 was Steve Young's completion percentage. And the big thing there is that they're all Hall of Famers, and those stats are not the holder of the record for that stat. And it has nothing to do with being the best in any given category. It has everything to do with being consistently exceptional overall. You can be absolutely average in stats, but if you are consistent and you're not going up and down, more often than not, you're going to find more success than you will failure. And that's a big thing for me. And at this point, I'd love to be able to open it up to the rest of the group and really understand final thoughts, final comments, final issues you may have with Iowa or any other place. Morgan, we'll start with you.
You know what? I'm going to take it back to Will Smith, and I'm going to take it back to his acceptance speech, and I'm going to read what he said, and I want to break it down just real quick. He said, to do what we do, we have to be able to take abuse. Have people talk crazy about you, people disrespecting you, and you got to, with a smile, you got to take it with a smile. You got to pretend that that's okay, right? So I understand what he did was absolutely terrible. He lost it, right? In one of the craziest moments in live television history. I mean, we're going to be talking about this for 10 years, right? I mean, this is something a grown man went to another grown man because he made a joke about his wife. And I don't think Chris Rock knew that she had something going on with her. I don't think he knew that she had a patient. I don't think he knew that. What I'm hearing is he didn't, right? So he's making an offhanded joke about this woman's hair, and Chris, and you look back at it and you say, okay, and at first Will Smith was laughing, and then he looks over at his wife and she's not having it, right? So then he's like, okay, I got to protect my woman. This is not right. But hearing what he said, this thing's building up, right? This whole culture of becoming somebody who's being talked about, being disrespected, and him just doing a movie about Richard Williams, right? About somebody who did all the things that he did, documented to protect his children and his wife and his family. And then he goes out there and he does those things to Chris Rock. But listening to him, it sounds like there's other things going down. It wasn't that one moment where he lost it, right? It was the culture that's going on around him that, again, it goes down to accountability. Certain things were said to him and somebody let that go, right? Nobody said anything to that person that said something to Will Smith, or he heard somebody say something else, or Will Smith heard somebody say something. And nobody said anything back and forth to that person to make sure that they were accountable for what they did or what they should have done better, right? I go back to Harry Miller. Harry Miller had that Today Show interview, and he talked about, I'm going to read what he said real quick. He said, I guess I've been always a little bit depressed. Years passed, I felt good in high school. When I got to college, it just got sort of difficult. You've got these young people being thrust under the bright lights. And as a graduate and as a student athlete, you play a hard game. And maybe you made a lot of mistakes. People send you, messages saying, transfer, you suck. Some people get death threats that I know on the team. And when I'm trying to text my mom, and that's the first thing I see, and you can't worry about it too much because you have an exam the next day and you have, that for a week and then months. And then by the end of it, the semester, you're like, what's happening right now? And when is it just, and then he says, it just breaks my heart, right? Again, it goes back to all these things that are happening around him, right? And then the one thing just, it snaps. And the same thing with Will Smith. It's just one thing, all these things are happening around him, and then he snaps. But where's the accountability for the people like Harry Miller? Where's the people that are accountable for people like Will Smith that are going through some shit, right? And all of a sudden you look at the end transaction of it and you're like, damn, Will Smith's an asshole, right? Or Harry Miller, man, I'm glad he got some help and I'm glad he's talking to somebody. But what about all those things that led up to Harry Miller doing the things that he did? What about all those things that led up to Will Smith doing the things that he did? So to me, it comes back to, obviously, the only thing you can change is yourself. The only thing you can make sure that doesn't react to something is yourself, right? Be mindful of the moment, take care of the moment. But there's a lot of things that happen to us along the way within the culture that we live in that goes back to a lot of things that we talked about accountability, about making sure people are doing the right thing, making sure people are being taken care of, making sure people are feeling supported. And that to me is, probably the biggest takeaway from this conversation is, yeah, there's things and things that happen, but there's also things that happen that we don't see that occur.
100%. Bill, final thoughts, comments.
Yeah, great response, Morgan. I couldn't agree more. I'll kind of, from my perspective, putting my takeaways on it, the mindfulness, right? It's our responsibility to be mindful. Know your teammates, know your audience. To say you didn't know somebody was suffering from something, that's on you. Own it. Number two, composure, right? Adversity will present itself. Things will be said. How are you preparing yourself, or how are you prepared to have the best choice possible where you react, and you react according? And I'm not saying just fall in line and do what everybody else says to do. Be an individual and do your own work, keep practicing, but, recognize and also own that composure piece of it. And I think if we can do more of that, hey, listen, let's have the grand goal in the world, right? We're going to clean up social media. We're going to do all those things. That's not going to happen. So my takeaway, be mindful, know what's going on around you, have your composure, be ready to pull the things that you need to make the best choice possible, and keep practicing, right? Just move it forward.
Yep. 100%. Well said. I think you guys hit on some really, really good points. So I get to luckily keep this pretty short and sweet. I think the outputs that we give to life are obviously products of what we take in or what we put into ourselves. And so you can't obviously have a composure meltdown if you aren't first controlling the things that are going in that help that, create that buildup, right? Like, you think of a volcano. It takes a long time for that eruption, right? You get to control if those things, start to build up or not. And, you talk about the guy who threw the beer at Ron Artest. He was doing something that he probably would naturally have done. And he was kind of what you could probably call a ticking time bomb. If it wasn't that game, he may have done it the very next one. Right. So it just comes down to when you control what you put in and what you choose to view the world as, you manage the lens that you look at the world through, and you manage the information that you take in, and you manage where you get your news from, or how you scroll social media. I don't think there's anything wrong with social media. I think people have no intention behind how they use it, and therefore they go on there and they just perpetuate something that isn't healthy. I think if people went on there and they were just like, I want to look for a feel-good story, they'd find it, and that's the only thing that they would remember, and they would perpetuate more of that. But instead, people go on there with haphazardly, and they see what the majority of people are putting on there, which is kind of like the news. If it bleeds, it leads. So I think if we are just mindful, like you mentioned, if we're mindful of just what we put in, you just get stuff that's better coming out. And so if that's if that's one thing that people can do this week, just be mindful, right? Keep track of that stuff. And if you don't like what you're doing, switch it up. Change what you're putting in, and I promise you'll get different results. Okay. That concludes it for today. Gentlemen, thank you so much. We'll be, as we mentioned, next time we will be joined by none other than Kim Brady, who will put in, she's not afraid to fight with anybody on this panel.
That's right.
Physically or mentally.
You're going to need a bigger air horn.
I know. I'm going to have to crank up the volume and absolutely just start blaring people. This was awesome. Once again, this is the first one we're doing. If there are things that stood out to the people who are watching or listening to this, comment what those things are. If you're seeing this on YouTube or LinkedIn or any social media outlet, or if you're even listening to this on your favorite podcasting platform, leave a review, leave a comment, whether it's what we should name ourselves, which for the time being, we're still figuring that out, or if there's something that stood out to you, or if you want to continue the conversation with any of the people that are on here, let us know. That's obviously why we're here. That's why we're having these conversations. But obviously, until next time, can't wait to see you guys. Thank you so much.
See you guys.